bill is about balancing our budget.
Tonight, filmmaker Bob Bowdon exposes the unionized workforce whose students are deficient in reading, despite huge sums of taxpayer money wasted on the schools. Then, the victims are also our children. Here now to expose just how poorly the unionized teacher workforce teaches in Wisconsin and across America is filmmaker Bob Bowdon, whose documentary, The Cartel, exposes the corruption and mediocrity integral to our public school system. Bob, it's a pleasure. Welcome back. Welcome here.
Thanks.
How bad is teaching today in public schools? Focus in, if you could, on Wisconsin.
Well, all you have to do is look at the NAEP numbers. It's called the Nation's Report Card, administered by the U.S. Department of Education. This is a statistically administered test to all races and incomes, given in all 50 states, by the way.
Right.
And in Wisconsin, only 45% of fourth graders test. This is the 2009 test, the most recent for which there's data available.
Right.
Only 45% test proficient in math. And by the time they're in 8th grade, it drops to 39% proficient. Now, there are no riots and protests over that.
Right.
There's no riots and protests when they can't fire an alcoholic teacher or just a teacher who's no good or maybe not talented. That seems to go fine. Or a failing school that may have for generations in Madison or Milwaukee not served its students. Never any riots for that, only when it comes to these pensions that are really untenable in the current economy.
Here's my belief as to why there is a serious problem with education in this country, because there's no real competition. The teachers know the kids are going to be in the seats, and the taxpayers are just going to be sending in the money, no matter how poorly they do. So they have no incentive to do a good job, because there's no other place those tax dollars and those kids can go to.
Yeah.
With few exceptions. Some people are wealthy enough to pay the taxes and send their kids to private schools.
Right. And, you know, there's a wide, obviously there are thousands and thousands of public schools, so there are some great teachers. There are some great schools because they just happen to have really inspired leaders maybe in those schools that are kind of out-of-the-box thinkers.
Right.
But nevertheless, the broad swath of American society, it's shown in the international comparisons. All you have to do is look at how the U.S. ranks compared to other large industrialized countries, and we spend the most and do the worst.
We spend the most and do the worst. Is there any practical way to measure how well a teacher teaches? When I say practical, I mean given the collective bargaining agreements that the states have entered into with the teachers' unions.
Sure. Well, actually, data crunched by the RAND Corporation was released just last year, 2010, by the LA Times, causing A.J. Duffy, the teachers' union leader in Los Angeles, to announce a boycott of the LA Times, and which went nowhere, of course. But this was, it's called, you know, it's data that's used over time where they can aggregate. It's not just do they pass or fail one test? Are your students proficient? It's how do those same students do the year before they're taught by you, the year after they're taught by you, and versus the year they are taught by you. What? And so you can aggregate 7 or 8 years of this data, hundreds and hundreds of students, and come up with how far you bring them during your year. It's not just proficiency, it's how good a job you do as a teacher.
Right. Here in New York City, they have the notorious rubber rooms, places where teachers who are such lousy teachers that they can't be allowed to teach, but they just sort of sit there during the day and do whatever they want to do. They're not exposed to the kids, and they get paid. Is that unique to New York City, or does that exist wherever these collective bargaining agreements are?
No, actually, in most places, those kinds of teachers just sit home and collect pay. It's actually unusual to have them show up somewhere and read the newspaper and collect pay. In fact, New York City schools announced that they were, going to be getting rid of those rubber rooms. So whether or not they're sitting at home or whether they're showing up to the rubber room is really not very meaningful to me. The fact is that you virtually can't fire a bad teacher.
Well, how could that be that you can't fire? And I have not read these collective bargaining agreements. You've studied them, and you've done this great film about them. Do they actually allow people that don't know how to teach to stay on the payroll?
You wouldn't believe some of these agreements. First of all, yes. Secondly, I talked to Joel Klein, the former chancellor of the New York City Public Schools. He had a contract one year that I had wrote about, and then I met him and discussed it with him, where the amount of hours that they were supposed to teach was down to the seconds, not just minutes, but it was something like 7 hours, 15 minutes, and 30 seconds a day that they had to teach. If they teach any more than that, they eventually, and as we show in the Cartel movie, teachers who want to stay late and work harder than the union says you're supposed to in the contract get pressured and intimidated by the union not to. They're making the other teachers look bad.
So the unions do not help
hardworking teachers that are interested in the kids and want to get ahead.
No, I get emails all the time from people saying, don't use my name, but I'm a teacher and I agree with the cartel movie, or yes, you know, my union rep is not representing me, what can I do? They just want to get an administration job in the school instead of help me. So unions are not supported as much as you'd think by the very teachers themselves that they're supposed to represent.
Is The Cartel, your great documentary, still out there?
Thanks. Oh, yeah, well, the DVD just came out in December. So the thing that's great about the DVD is you can pass it around. You know, we believe in preaching beyond the choir.
Right.
So sometimes just the downloads, if you just download a movie these days, as you can do on iTunes or other ways on demand, you just haven't watched it yourself. But the DVD you can pass around.
All right. We're talking to the only self-professed libertarian filmmaker in Hollywood, and the movie is called The Cartel. Bob Bowdon, thank you very much for joining us.
Anytime. Thanks, Judge.
When it comes to the